This is Angel Fury by Fryxgames, and I believe this is the same designer as Terraforming Mars, which was the first part of this game that caught my attention. The theme obviously grabbed me as well, and I've been posting some pictures of the game. What I have set up here is a game in progress, 4-player game. The white and the yellow against the red and the black. And I've shared some blurbs on X and on Facebook about it, but it's generated enough questions. I thought a video might be warranted here, so let's just kind of explore this a little bit. I'll give you a rundown what the game is about, because obviously playing on a grid that looks like, you know, chess or checkers makes the game look simplistic and maybe not much of a war game. This actually is a war game, and it has a lot of attributes of war games that merit close examination. It's also a very simple game in terms of picking up the core mechanics, teaching you how to play. I think this is a very simple game with deceptively simple underlying strategies. In other words, there's a lot more to the game than what meets the eye. While it appears very simple and the principles are easily taught, there is a lot of gameplay involved here. So what you have here is you have the good side, the angels, and you have the evil side, the demons. And the objective of the game is to amass influence over a single human being, a single human soul. So this is the spiritual battle. This is what takes place in the spiritual dimension in the life of a single human being. Now, to win the game, your faction has to be in control of the single space that contains the human soul. So let's look at the map and look at the terrain, if you will. We're familiar with war games, so let's talk about the terrain. So each space can accommodate a certain number of figures. So there's your stacking concept. And so each space will contain a maximum of 9 figures. Each of the figures have a certain shape to them, and so these are your worker bees, if you will. This is a demon, and it is a single unit. Whoops, dropped it. Where'd he go? Here he is. So single unit, and you can have 9 of these inside a single space. Now this guy here, this is an archdemon, and he takes up the equivalent of exactly 6 of these. So this is a 6. This has a stacking value of 6, if you will. And so how they've depicted something that we would normally do an encounter with a numeric figure, they've done spatially by creating miniatures that take up, you know, the equivalent of 6 figures of an ordinary unit. So there's your stacking concept done in a way that I think would be very easy for young players or new players to be able to appreciate and understand. You also have these guys. These are called tormentors for the evil faction. They're called seraphs, which is a biblical term for the good faction. I'll give you a look at one here. Very cool. The sculpts are kind of fashioned after a passage from Isaiah chapter 6. It's very cool. They take up 4 spaces, so they're equivalent to 4 of your ordinary units. But you also run into a type of terrain that takes up the equivalent of 4 spaces. There's a couple of terrain pieces that are 3-dimensional. You have these pools, and then you have these mountains of crystal. And being in possession of these locations at the end of your turn will either generate reinforcements or resource points that you're going to use for various functions in the game. So looking on the board, every terrain feature is significant in some way. The next piece of terrain feature is the altars. And on a 4-player game, there will be 2 of these for the good side, 2 for the bad side. The evil side is occupying one located here. And the map is drawn in such a way that you can tell what's in there, even though the pieces are actually covering it. You can see the little steps leading up to the altar. So you got an altar here, altar here. Those are spawn points. That's where reinforcements can be brought into play. So when units die, and it's a very bloody game, you're going to see a lot of units dying back and forth, and you'll be spawning new ones, and those are important. They are like your this is where your reinforcements come back into play. So wargamers, we're familiar with that concept. Your tormentors and seraphs are also mobile spawn points, if you will. These guys move around like ordinary units, but they can also be a spawn point for bringing your reinforcements back into play, which allows you to get troops to critical parts of the battlefield quickly. and be able to sustain an offensive into enemy territory. Obviously, you see the good side is going to have territory there, evil side over here, and there's a considerable amount of maneuver in the game. The last piece of terrain, obviously, is the human soul, which the good side is actually occupying at the moment. And so that's what this is your critic. You can't win without that space. That's the most important space on the board. But you also can't ignore these other terrain features. Occupying them is going to give you the resources needed to be able to win control and maintain control over this long enough to win the game. You got to have 7 soul points to win the game. Right now it's tied 3-3, and every game I played has been pretty tight. It's again, it looks like a game that it would be like, oh, I think this would get old really quick. Let me show you why it doesn't. Now, to explain, let me just go over the brief mechanics, the simple mechanics of the game on here. All movement is done orthogonally. There's no diagonal movement under ordinary circumstances. However, there is a whole other dimension to the game involved with these the cards. I forget exactly what they're called, but these cards, these resource cards, these are what drive a lot of the gameplay and allow you to do things that supersede the ordinary rules of the game in terms of movement, combat, the gathering of resources, placement of reinforcements, and things of that nature. One of the cool things, if you are playing 4-player, the game's flow of play is very simple, very straightforward, but it is a little bit different. Most 4-player games where you got 2 on one side, 2 on the other side, you're going to have each player takes their own turn. So player 1 takes a turn, player 2 takes a turn, 3, then 4. It doesn't work like that in Angel Fury. What happens is both players have to work together and they jointly conduct their game turn collectively. Each player has this mat which will dictate how many commands that they have to move troops around. You keep your reinforcements and your resource crystals nearby, shows you what your hand size is, and it keeps, this is where your deck, draw pile, and discard is located, as well as the health of your Archangel, which is your most powerful piece. A place for the game card, which describes your Archangel or Archdemon. You'll place that in this space here. You also have a space for upgrades to your Tormentors, which give them enhanced ability. In addition to their already pretty large ability as it is, they get even more as the game progresses. You acquire these through this expenditure of resources. So, each player is going to have one of these. Each player has their own pool of command points. This one here is bought an upgrade, so he's gotten 4 command points as opposed to this side's got 3. But what you can do is you have to jointly decide how to maneuver your guys around, and the setup is done in such a way that your forces are entangled with one another. So you have to work together in order to be successful. So that's something I really like about the game. The setups are pretty much fixed in the 4-player game. There is a 2-player game which uses a smaller board. I don't have it set up now, but I want to say it's like maybe this grid size. Maybe cut off two rows from either dimension. I think that would give you what the 2-player board looks like. There's only 1 altar for each side. There's, I think, 1 less terrain feature on that particular board. And then on the other side of the 2-player board, there is a 3-player board. It's the same size of a board, but it's arranged a little bit differently. In that particular game, there's 1 good faction that is defending a soul, and you have 2 demon factions that are attacking against it. There is also a solitaire solitaire game, I should say, on the 2-player game board that you can use, where you play the angel against a demon that uses its own deck of cards to manage its gameplay. So you can play this solitaire if you object to playing as Baal or Moloch and so forth. Let me talk about these cards. This is the really innovative feature of the game. And if you played Terraforming Mars, you know that the designer has experience building a very good engine building kind of a game, deck building kind of principles in it. And so what you have here is you have a system that is very much a deck building system. You begin with a player deck. Everyone's player deck on the good faction is the same. Everyone on the evil faction, it's the same 12 cards with 1 exception. each of your leading figures, your archangel, or your archdemon, will have 2 cards that are unique to him that you substitute a couple of the starting cards out for. So 10 of the cards is going to be identical to your playing partner. There is a little asymmetry. The cards that the angels have many of the same features that the cards of the evil faction have, but there is an asymmetry to it. They're not identical to one another in terms of capability and what those cards actually do. So you have 12 cards in your deck. Now, as the game progresses, you're going to acquire resource points, and they come in 2 flavors. You have reinforcements of angels, and you have these crystals. These are obtained by being in possession of these pools or these crystal mountain terrain features. So, for example, the white angel faction has a crystal mountain there. They are in that pool, this crystal mountain, that pool, and that pool, but not that pool. Only the yellow angel faction has that one. And so you look at this at the end of your turn. This is where you gather resources and you keep it near your board. Your archangel or your archdemon will also tell you how many additional resources that you get at the end of your turn, in addition to the terrain features that you occupy. Now, of course, if your archangel dies, you lose that. So that's kind of a big deal that you want to be aware of. So you use these features here in order to, let me show you this, purchase upgraded cards. Began with Healing Hands level 1 with the White Angel faction. And so during gameplay, I was able to acquire Healing Hands level 2 by paying 4 crystals. And so what you do with this is when you buy an upgraded card, you don't add it to your deck. You instead take a card from your deck that's in your hand, and you remove it from play permanently to insert the new card into play. If it is a level 2 card, it can only be purchased if you have the level 1 card in your hand at that moment, and then you can purchase it and replace the level 1 card for the level 2 card. If you don't have the level 1 card in your hand, you can purchase this ahead of time and put a single card into your reserve space here next to your playmat. Then when you get the level 1 card, you can make the swap. The key point is this: your deck will have 12 cards in it and never more or never less than 12 cards. Always 12 cards. And this is where increasing your hand size by paying 5 crystals is an important strategy decision to maybe make, because the more cards you're pulling, the more likely it is you'll be able to get to your more powerful cards again and again. When your card deck is exhausted, you do not reshuffle it. Instead, you take the discard pile, you flip it over, it becomes your draw pile, meaning that the last card that you played is going to be the last card on the deck. The first card you played in your discard is going to be the first on the deck. That's something else you have to think about as you're playing the game. So there's a considerable amount of simplicity to the game, and yet some complexity that if you're a deep thinker, this is going to keep you engaged, okay? And every game's going to be different because your initial shuffle is going to be huge to how the game progresses. How do you get these cards? There is a deck of upgrades that you begin with, and 4 are arranged on this tableau, and it's from this that you can purchase these cards. When you purchase a card, you sometimes have to make a really difficult choice of, for example, let's say the Flaming Sword. This is a level 1 Flaming Sword. Do I want to purchase this? If I choose to purchase this Flaming Sword level 1, because I don't have a level 1 card for Flaming Sword in my hand, I would have to give up something. Give up one of my starting cards. So I got to think of what can I afford to give up from my starting hand to bring this one in. Is that really going to be a good trade for me? Now, some cards you can purchase from here that you do not have to give up something for, and those would be your upgrades to your Seraphs or to your Tormentors. As soon as you purchase one of those cards, you draw another one from the deck. And if you don't like any of your options out here and you're willing to spend it, you can always spend 2 crystals to remove a card from here permanently to draw a new one and get a new option. Every game, you're not going to go through this before the game goes and ends. So there is an important part of the game of building a powerful deck as you're maneuvering on here, but you can't focus overly on this, nor can you ignore this And you have to bear in mind that the game is not going to go that terribly long. You know, as soon as 7 of these tokens are placed on the soul, then it's game over. So I've yet to play a game where that space was left empty at the end of a turn, although I concede that it is possible that that can happen. It's unlikely. So you're probably looking at, you know, a maximum of 14 turns being done. In a 2-player game, you're going to play a game of this in an hour or less, I would say. Let me talk about the Archangels here for a second. Archangels and Archdemons have these cards that give you certain abilities. It shows you what you're going to start with in terms of what cards are going to be in your hand, what resources, if any, you're going to start with, an ability that's going to be with your character for the duration of the game as long as he's alive. Your reinforcements. This guy adds 1 crystal, 1 angel to your reinforcements at the end of each turn. And you also have a healing ability. At the end of each turn, you heal your character's health by that much, but never is the health more than the starting health, which is this rating here. You track the health of your character on this tableau. Because the Archangels are powerful and they can take, this guy can take up to 15 hits, Baal can take up to 15, but he's been in a pretty big battle back and forth between him and Uriel. Uriel's got a maximum health of 11, and so some of this will go down and it'll move up slowly. I was able to heal Uriel after that battle by +1, and also I had a healing card in his hand that bumped him up a couple notches as well. And so these guys, you know, they can fight, and every single unit throws 1 die in battle. Now, each space can hold a maximum of 9 units, or the equivalent thereof. So you're never going to throw more than 9 dice in battle. So having this Archangel, an Archangel all by himself is going to throw 6 dice every time, as long as he's alive. You might want to pack some Angels along or Demons along with those guys in order to throw extra dice and also soak up losses without taking harm to your Archangel. And this is where, again, tough choices come into play. Do I take the damage on my Archangel to throw more dice on the next round? And combat is done round after round after round until somebody quits and retreats, either the attacker going back to where they came from or the defender moving back towards his friendly side of the board. To attack, actually, you spend a command point, one of your command points, to move into that space. Obviously, there's no space to actually accommodate these two, so we just declare that that's what's happening, roll the dice out, play cards back and forth, and see how things resolve. And that's how combat works. It's very elegant. There is 3 different results on the dice. You have a blank side, which are misses, ring sides, which are special. Sometimes they do nothing. Mostly they're going to do nothing, but if you have certain cards, they will do something. And then you have hits, which are portrayed by swords or axes. And so combat's going to basically work very simple. You roll 1 die for every one of your, the equivalency of the size of the force that's doing the attack. You can bring it forward. You'll notice that these Seraphs can never go into, or Tormentors can never go into these terrain features because it can't accommodate enough of the game piece to fit in there. So you got 4, the equivalency of 4 units here. So you can bring 5 individual guys into this space, but you can't bring one of these big dudes in. It won't accommodate the game piece. That is an intentional design limitation. You could attack into such a space, but at the end of the attack, you would not be able to occupy it if all you had was a Tormentor or a Seraph. Something I should mention about these guys, too, these are very powerful units, but they are also very fragile. They throw the equivalent of 4 dice in a combat situation, whether on attack or defense, but they can only absorb a single hit. If they're all alone like this guy, they're extremely vulnerable. Only 1 hit will kill him, and they're extremely expensive to purchase. You can get another one back, but you have to spend 5 of your reinforcements plus 5 crystals, making it the single most expensive game piece to reacquire. Usually it's not worth the effort to do so. But if you lose one, you also lose one of your mobile spawn points, and that can be a big deal. In terms of strategy, since this is the critical space, why bother with anything else? Well, you will quickly find that your attack will bog down, or you'll take such heavy losses you won't be able to sustain presence here without being able to have fresh resources. So cutting off your opponent's access to these pools or these crystal mountains is a important strategy to gameplay. The evil faction has cards that they have access to that allow them to teleport to empty spaces anywhere on the board, giving them a attack dimension that the angel forces don't typically have. The angel forces have cards that can pop guys down elsewhere, but they usually can't attack on the same turn, limiting their ability to inflict chaos behind enemy lines, although they can show up back here as an impediment and a distraction. The good faction has cavalry cards, which does allow you to move 2 spaces. So this force here with Michael could actually jump over this space and do an attack with a cavalry card. That's another feature that's different to the angel faction. The evil faction doesn't have anything like that. The evil faction has flaming arrows that they have archers that they can use to shoot into diagonal spaces. So even though you're diagonal and you think you're safe from this guy, maybe you're not. Maybe he uses archers to inflict some losses on this particular force and then use this legion to launch up a follow-on attack. But of course, for all of these, you're going to find yourself spending command points and you don't have enough to do what you want to do. Just moving into these terrain features like these pools or these crystal mountains will instantly give you one of those rewards, either a new demon to place or a crystal immediately into your hands. You don't have to wait till the end of your turn. You'll still get it at the end of your turn too, but maneuvering them in there gives you those assets, but at the expense of precious command points. So again, lots and lots of decisions, and you're going to do all of this in a very fluid style as a team. Spending your command in no structured order, buying upgrades, playing cards, doing all of these things in an unstructured way, and when you're decided that you're done as a team, then you collect your reinforcements and everything and play passes to the other side. If you control the soul, you get a soul point at that time. Then the other team does the same thing. They work together as a team. They look at their tableaus. They look at the cards available. They talk out what they want to do, how are we going to spend our command points, and when they're done, then it play passes to the other side, and how it goes. There is again, very important to have teamwork in your gameplay. If you want to play it just solo, pardon the expression, but God mode, where you have open information to everything, I think it plays just fine in that way. But there is an actual solitaire game that's included. There are more... I should say this. There are actually 4 Archangels and 4 Archdemon cards. You don't have the same access to the same bunch every turn. Each player is given 2 random boss characters, let's call them that. At the beginning of the game, you get 2 of them. You pick which one you want. The other one's removed and not used by either player. So that's how those guys work. So again, there's a lot of variability to the game, and I've played several games now of it. It's never quite felt samey. Even with the same board, same setup, I feel like the cards give you the extra dimension that you need to have a completely different and fresh playing experience every time you play it. Once again, I think it's the theme that drew me in. I think that, from a functional standpoint, you could probably do this game with counters, much smaller board, and achieve the same effect. But I think the game pieces... The fact that the shapes of the game pieces are integral to the gameplay and the ergonomics of it, the look of it, I think it's something that can draw people in, especially new players, and introduce your basic staple war game principles to an audience that may have never been exposed to games like this. The whole deck building mechanism, it's a cool crossover to someone that's played a Euro game that would be familiar with a lot of this. Maybe less so with this. So this is a kind of a cool crossover game concept that also I think merits some discussion. One last thought I will mention, 2 less thoughts. The storage is excellent. The big game pieces have molded or sculpted spaces, so everything fits in here nice. The cards all fit in here. I haven't sleeved them yet, but you can. I'm sure you can sleeve them. They would fit in there. All of the your basic worker bee demons and angels. There are 4 different sculpts, but functionally they are exactly the same, so you don't have to like separate them or anything. You just dump them in each of those 4 bins, and then there's baggies for your crystals and your discs and things of that nature. The rulebook itself, it looks and feels hefty. 28 pages, but let me clarify that the first half of that is actually like a comic explaining the or telling the story of the game concept. You don't actually even get to the setup until like page 6. It's a really easy rule book to process. There's videos online. I hardly had to read this. The videos online are excellent to learn the game. But it's a really well-written rule book. I've had no problems with this. I only needed one point of clarification and was able to achieve that very quickly on Board Game Geek. But your setup, everything, once you see the setup in here and then look at the map, it's actually pre-printed on the map, and you won't really need to reference this at all. Where there might be some ambiguity with the text on the cards, there is an exhaustive component to the back of the rule book, which gives you like the scenarios, and then you have this appendix of cards which has answered every single one of my questions as it pertained to the card text. Where something I felt was ambiguous, it is explicitly explained in the appendix. So I've been able to, have that on hand and reference it as needed and solve any gaming questions from that. So there you go. That's Angel Fury. I've been really enjoying this one. I think it's a really cool, like I said, it's a war game, but it has crossover appeal if you like Euro games, and especially the theme. I'm a pastor of a church. If you've read Frank Peretti or any of these, these writers, this is kind of what you envision with that. And it's just been a lot of fun to play. I've enjoyed it, and I think other people might enjoy this one too. It hasn't gotten a lot of press, so I thought I'd just do a little video. And if you enjoy this, subscribe to the channel. I haven't done a lot of content recently, but hopefully do some more videos this summer. Take care. Hope you enjoy the video. We'll see you around next time. One last thought I'd like to mention. I forgot to mention this earlier, so I'm just going to insert this here. Some people might ask, is this a Christian game? Because I'm really not into that. I don't want a religious game. This game does not advocate a particular religious viewpoint. The terminology that's used in the game tends to be from the Bible. I recognize it as such. Not all of it. For example, Michael is in the Bible. Ariel is not. Baal and Moloch are in the Bible. There's a couple other evil characters I don't recognize as being from the Bible. So some of this has its origins in biblical in scripture, but also in biblical tradition. There's some traditional characters listed here. But the game is a game. It does not advocate a particular position. For example, the evil side can win in the game. So that's something else. Some people might be uncomfortable with that. Others might not. But I thought I'd mention it because I think some people might raise the question: is this a game that's going to preach at me? Or it isn't. It doesn't advocate anything like that. The game text is all pretty much it's pretty much all about game functionality. Where you're going to find things that might sound biblical is basically in the names of some of the cards, but that is pretty much it. For example, I think there is a card that mentions prayer, this one, healing touch, but it's just in the that kind of terminology is just going to be like in the flavor text. The actual game text is all about what happens here. So thought I would just give that piece of clarity. I'm Joel Toppin. Hope you enjoyed this video.